it's Reija and welcome to another video. Today I'm going to be sharing with you my March comics reading wrap-up, which is also going to be my Translateathon round 3 wrap-up because I managed to read only comics during Translateathon. So without further ado, let's get started. The first thing I read during Translateathon was Tokyo Tarareba Girls by Akiko Higashimura. This is a contemporary manga that is geared towards young women, and this is about a group of friends who have all had trouble finding permanent partners and are kind of just spending their time together getting drunk and fantasizing about things that could have happened or what if scenarios. And they decide that they all want to get hitched before the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. And I love Akiko Higashimura's art. I've loved it ever since I read Jellyfish Princess. Her art is very reminiscent of like traditional shoujo manga from the 70s and 80s. Think of people like Ryoko Kui. Her use of lines and black ink is very reminiscent of that period. She doesn't actually use a lot of like gray tones. Which is interesting in my opinion, and I love her art. It is very fresh, it is at the same time very classic and modern. Now, as for the story, this whole volume was set up for the premise. We get to meet the main characters, we get to meet the potential love interest. Who knows what's gonna happen there. But I had trouble really figuring out who these characters were. Aside from the main character, like the very main protagonist, you don't really get to know much about her other friends. And I thought that this trio of friends was going to be like a very relevant part of the story, the fact that this is a group of friends. But as it was in this first volume, the main character's two other friends kind of are just side characters and foils to her more than anything. And I just didn't feel any like chemistry between the main male character and the protagonist. And pretty much all the characters are horrible people. Which makes me feel excited about possible character development, because Akiko Higashimura has done some pretty darn good character work in the past, so I'm excited for that. But I wasn't able to root for pretty much any of the characters. The jokes, some of them landed, some of them didn't. It was a bit of a mixed bag, so I ended up giving Tokyo Tarareba Girls Volume 1 3 stars. Moving on to the next series that I started reading during Translateathon, and that would be Delicious in Dungeon by Ryoko Kui. This was a lot of fun. Once again, I liked the art. In some parts of the volumes, the art was a bit cluttered, and the panel layout was kind of dense, and the panels were very small and crammed full of detail, so at points it was hard to make out all of the action. But the volumes were very funny and engaging, and I liked the characters, especially in the second volume where they really get to shine. The story is really interesting. This is basically a cooking manga where the characters must go back into this very difficult dungeon because the main character's sister got eaten by a dragon. And they have to go and rescue her before she gets digested and can't be resurrected anymore. So they enter the dungeon, and because they don't have any money and they don't have any resources to buy supplies, they decide that they are going to hunt and eat the monsters in the dungeon. And it is basically about them exploring the dungeon and going deeper into the depths of the dungeon and cooking various different meals from the creatures that they encounter. And it is really funny. I will say that if you have an aversion to meat and you know the idea of preparing meat, possibly skip this one, because there are a lot of scenes where the characters are preparing the meat from the creature that they have killed and cooking it. So if you get queasy by things like that, I suggest that you just skip this one. But it was super fun. In the first volume, I felt that because it definitely was all set up and the characters didn't really get to have their own moments and they just kind of blended together, that was the weaker volume. But the second one was really fun, really action-packed, and kind of made me think about the possibilities where the story might be going, which is really interesting. So I gave volumes 1 and 2 3.5 stars and 4 stars respectively. And the final things that I read during Translateathon were the first 2 volumes of Sillage, which is a science fiction graphic novel series that is created by a French comic artist and writer duo. And oh boy, I have a lot of feelings about this, and they are not very good ones. Basically, the story starts on a planet that is this kind of jungle planet, and it is getting colonized and terraformed by an alien race, which kind of rubs the main character, who happens to live on this planet and doesn't really care for the direction the terraforming is going, which is basically destroying her homeland. She takes umbrage with this and decides to fight against the aliens. And there is this... like, I have mixed feelings. I wanted to really like this. Like, this is a female-driven story about a strong female character who is assertive and skilled and athletic and, you know, allegedly can get shit done. But this is just so poorly written. Like, none of the characters feel like people. They just have pretty much a single character trait. The main character is rambunctious and kind of aggressive, and that's her character trait. She doesn't really grow past that in either of the volumes. And I also had a lot of trouble with the art, because this read to me very much like female character that is drawn purely for titillation, which, you know, might not be bad for some people, but for me, I was like, this is getting so old. And especially in the second one, where the author wants to tackle themes like human trafficking and sexual slavery, it kind of got a bit too much, because, you know, you start seeing all these boobs and naked women that are drawn as purely background decor. None of them get any kind of development or agency or, you know, stories of their own. And they're just there to be gawked at by the main character and the main villain. And, you know, the author didn't give the story and the themes enough weight and enough respect. It kind of felt gimmicky and jokey, and I just was so done with it. I gave the first volume 3 stars because I thought that even if it was a kind of generic sci-fi story that pretty much reminded me of Valerian, to be honest, even though it was a bit generic, I saw promise there. My goodwill towards this series went down so rapidly in the second volume, and I was like, nope, I'm not going to continue, this is not for me, and I can't. The plot is so bare bones, the characterization is so bare bones, I can't. I ended up giving the second one 2 stars, because the art was relatively pretty. And finally, I read something that wasn't for Translateathon, and that would be Monstress Volume 3, Haven. And I quite liked it. Once again, the art is gorgeous. Sana Takeda is a highly skilled artist, and her work is top-notch. All of the characters have very distinct styles, and I feel like I haven't seen a lot of these kinds of like characters and this kind of world. The world feels genuinely refreshing and original, even though a lot of the story beats I am familiar with from reading manga for so many years. But I will say that for me, right now, Monstress needs to slow down and start developing the characters and character relationships aside from Maika and the monster, because I feel like we currently have like 7 different factions that are, you know, making a bit for the mask and for resurrecting the gods, and we don't really know much of anything about any of the characters in said factions except for Maika, the monster, and Kippa. All of the others are kind of like irrelevant at this point because we don't know much about anything. And I also feel like a lot of the world building is done in huge expository info dumps in between chapters, and I think that could be improved a lot. Maybe show, don't tell, is what I'm saying. So I really like Monstress's approach to character design. The art is amazing. I feel like it does certain things differently than other comic book series that I'm reading, but at the same time, there's a lot of info dumping, not enough character development of side characters. We don't actually like get names for all of these characters, which probably, you know, maybe give them names and backstory and make me care about them. So Monstress Volume 3 is also a bit of a mixed bag for me. I gave it 3.5 stars, looking forward to the next installments, but I'm not as enamored with Monstress as many other people are. And there you have it. Those were all the comics that I read during the month of March. Have you read any of these comics? Let me know down in the comments, and I will see you in another video very soon. Bye bye!